The scene shifted to a group of people walking along a dimly lit road under the cover of night. An old woman, holding a lantern, glanced over her shoulder and slowed her pace. She stepped back toward Azadin and the others and said, "The road ahead will be rougher. Go on without delay." Handing the lantern to Ishmael, she added, "Please guide your younger sister and uncle well. This is an extra lantern, so keep it with you." Taking the lantern, Ishmael responded with a bright smile, "Ah, thank you. I'll take care of my uncle, so please don't worry." Meanwhile, Azadin thought to himself, "It seems people are much kinder when I play blind." A few hours earlier, outside the town, the same soldier who had taken charge after Tarkif's departure addressed the crowd. Standing tall, he announced in a loud, firm voice, "The knights and mercenaries have left." To clarify, the townspeople referred to the local defenders as soldiers, while the heavily armed forces were called mercenaries. The soldier continued, his voice filled with determination, "However, we must remind you that the village still needs protection. We ask those who can fight to remain and stand with us. Even if you can't fight directly, just providing support will help. That way, while we defend the village, the elderly and injured will have a better chance to escape." Among the crowd, the man who had been beaten by the mercenaries turned to his young daughter and said with determination, "Cosette, your father will fight too. I'll protect you, Cosette." Cosette, wide-eyed, protested, "What? You can't even cut an apple, Dad." The flashback faded, returning to the present. Mid-I spoke, her voice filled with disdain. "I can't believe knights who live to serve the people are casting out their own. It's disgraceful, pathetic, and unsightly." As Azadin walked next to Mid-I, he listened to her and remained silent. After a moment of contemplation, Azadin replied with his usual calmness, "They may be the people of Wybris, but rather than casting out those they are sworn to protect, they seem to think of it as a noble deed." Mid-I considered his words and nodded. "I guess so. It would be odd for an Aragasan to sympathize with the people of Wybris. No matter, I feel the same way." As they continued walking, Azadin suddenly stopped. Without warning, his body began to dissolve into a black fog. He turned his fading form toward them and said, "Let's part ways here." Mid-I ran toward him, her voice urgent. "Hey, wait." By the time she reached where he had been standing, Azadin's figure had completely disappeared, leaving no trace behind. Ishmael called out in confusion, "Wait. Uncle, where'd you go?" The scene shifted to the town gates, where the townsfolk were preparing for the impending battle. A soldier, his face pale with terror, turned to the captain. "Captain, look." The captain followed the soldier's gaze and froze. Across the field stood an army of goblins, lined up in precise formation like a well-trained force. At the front of the horde loomed a massive ogre, its towering figure radiating menace. The ogre stepped forward, saliva dripping from its mouth as it spoke in a guttural voice. "My name, Goldu." With a sickening grin, Goldu removed the basket strapped to his back. A bloody hand dangled from within, crimson drops staining the ground. "We store meat. Eat for very, very long. Invest. We know. Smart ogres. Human village. Strong fort. Big." The ogre's heavy foot slammed into the ground, causing it to tremble. His deep, booming voice echoed, "Many, meat." The captain, realizing the gravity of the situation, barked out an order. "The ogre is their leader. Shoot him." The soldiers, trembling but resolute, raised their bows and unleashed a volley of arrows. The arrows hit their mark, striking the ogre. Goldu shielded his face with a massive hand, roaring in anger. Behind him, a goblin wearing a skull mask and wielding a wand crouched low, hiding behind the ogre's basket. The goblin screeched, "Charge! Break through the gate!" At his command, the ogre let out a deafening roar and began his advance, his army of goblins charging behind him, ready to unleash chaos upon the village. As the ogre charged, the goblins surged forward, attacking the gate with relentless ferocity. The captain, seeing the onslaught, shouted, "Protect the gate! Shoot the ones closest to us!" Despite the hail of arrows, the goblins pressed on. One raised its axe high and slammed it into the door. Meanwhile, standing at the rear of the goblin horde, the ogre picked up a massive stone and hurled it at the gate. The stone struck with a deafening crash, leaving a large crack in the wooden barrier. Inside, those holding the door saw goblin axes hacking through the fracture, and panic spread among them. "They're breaking in," someone screamed in terror. The captain's voice boomed above the chaos. "Shoot! Shoot them dead." As arrows rained down, Cosette watched, trembling, her thoughts consumed by fear. "Run, far, far away." Amid the chaos, the goblin leader, wearing a skull mask, glanced at his wand. Flames flickered to life around it, and with a devilish grin, he raised it high. A sinister light emanated from the wand as the goblin leader bellowed, "The wand has responded. The Book of the Divine King. The Book of the Divine King is near." His words were cut short when Azadin appeared out of nowhere, slamming his foot into the goblin leader's head and smashing him into the ground. Azadin leaped into the air, positioning himself above the ogre just as it picked up another massive stone. With a roar, the ogre hurled the boulder toward the wall. Those atop the structure froze in terror, their bones chilled as they watched the stone hurtling toward them. The stone smashed into the top of the wall, shattering it and causing rubble to rain down. But before the debris could crush the people below, Azadin swooped in, grabbing them and leaping to safety. He set them down near the captain, who stared at him in stunned confusion. "I'll aid you in defending the gate," Azadin declared. The captain, still reeling, stammered, "Who are you?" Fixing his bow with practiced precision, Azadin replied coolly, "Just a passing herald of the emperor." The captain and his soldiers exchanged nervous glances, their faces pale. "A herald of the emperor? You mean, the Herald Clan?" Before they could say more, Azadin jumped back onto the wall and fired an arrow. 2 more arrows flew simultaneously from different directions, both striking the ogre's eyes with pinpoint accuracy. The ogre roared in pain, clutching at his face. My eyes! My eyes!" Blinded and enraged, the massive creature turned, trampling its own goblin army underfoot in its blind fury. "I'll kill you! I'll kill you all," it bellowed, stomping aimlessly. Azadin leapt onto the ogre's face, using it as a vantage point. As the ogre thrashed and crushed goblins beneath its feet, Azadin calmly drew his bow, shooting arrows into the goblin ranks with deadly precision. "That's right. You're moving well," Azadin thought, smirking as chaos spread through the goblin horde. One arrow found its mark in a goblin's eye, while others sowed panic among the ranks. The captain, watching in awe from the wall, whispered, "Is he really a Slayer of Sanctity?" As Azadin continued his assault, the basket on the ogre's back fell to the ground. He glanced back at it, his eyes narrowing as he recognized the man crawling out from the pile of corpses inside. "Isn't that the mugger from before?" Azadin thought, narrowing his eyes. It was, indeed, the leader of the bandits Azadin had dealt with earlier. The man, trembling and covered in blood, looked around in horror. His gaze landed on the goblin leader's trembling body and the bandit leader. With a devilish grin, goblin leaders rasped, "The Book of the Divine King." Drool began to spill from his mouth as his body started to contort. Blisters began to form ominously on the right arm of the goblin leader. A grotesque chunk of flesh extended from his arm like a sinewy rope, from which sharp teeth unexpectedly sprouted. The goblin leader emitted a devilish laugh, his rope-like arm extending and coiling behind him. "I will be," he began, his voice taking on a monstrous edge, "the king of the Fong," his cackle resounding with malevolence. Perched atop an ogre's head, Azadin was oblivious to the eerie transformation until the goblin's arm bizarrely bit its own head. "What is this?" Azadin exclaimed, turning to face the chaos behind him. Upon closer inspection, he realized that the goblin had morphed into a creature far removed from any typical goblin. Its arms and legs had transformed into menacing tentacles lined with sharp teeth. "It looks like it will be a pain to deal with," Azadin remarked grimly, gauging the severity of the threat. Without warning, the tentacles began to thrash wildly, striking indiscriminately. One of the tentacles surged towards Azadin, signaling the start of a daunting battle.